We started the conversation without you again. I'm sorry, but we'll get you up to date. Of course, we're joined at this time by Dr. Jorge Lopez. He is a dermatologist, and he's here to tell us how do we protect our skin during the Easter holidays. So, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Doc, and welcome. Easter is here. You know, next weekend is definitely that weekend where a lot of people will be going everywhere. The month of March, going into April, is definitely one of the hottest time of the year, and we tend to want to be outdoors. Now, we need to learn the best way possible to take care of our skin. Now, jump in with me anytime you're ready. What's the best way to take care of your skin? Is there a regimen to do before you sleep at night, when you wake up in the morning? What's the secret?
Yes. Okay, all right. Well, to start with, in terms of skin care in general, all you need is to keep your skin moisturized, basically. So having a routine in place in which you're using a moisturizer is always a good idea, especially if you're going to be outdoors and exposed to sunlight, because that will keep your skin healthy, you know? In terms of protection from UV radiation and sunlight, we have different strategies, right? One of them is, of course, avoidance, which is the least people like.
So that's not going to happen over Easter break.
No, that's definitely not going to happen.
I understand during the regular time we can try to avoid the sun, but this is one time it'll be midday, hottest time of the day.
The case, though, where I would really want for avoidance to happen is especially with babies.
Okay.
Because, you know, when I go places and I see a baby, you know,
directly in the sun, yes.
Yeah. So we have to understand that babies that are 6 months or less than 6 months old, we cannot use, or we should not use, sunscreen, and they could get heat stroke very easily.
Oh, wow.
So you don't want them, even if it's in the shade but it's outdoors, you still feel the heat, right?
Yes.
So please keep the babies in a cool environment. Keep them with long sleeves, long pants, preferably clear colors for babies, right? And of course, protected with umbrellas or whatever. But
0 to 6 months we're talking here.
yes, no sunscreen. Starting 6 months, then you could start using sunscreen for them.
But there are special sunscreens for them.
Yeah, yes, definitely. We have some ingredients that are best suited for sensitive skin, like babies want, no? So avoidance is, in that case, I would definitely want it to happen. Okay.
That must frustrate you when you go out and you see babies that young in the sun.
Yes, it hurts.
Yeah.
Yes, it hurts. Now, aside of avoidance, then we have other things we can do, like, for example, clothing, right? In terms of what to wear, you want to wear long sleeve, long pants, but not just any fabric. What I tend to tell my patients is, you know if a shirt will protect you good if you just put it in front of the light and you cannot see much light. That's a very good shirt, for example, to wear. But if you put it on and all the light gets to you, then you know that shirt is not going to protect you. Now, you have clothing that come with protection for the sun, right? So those ones, most of the time, the extra protection that supposedly they offer, it will wear off after 4 or 5 washes. There are very interesting studies that have shown that if you buy a shirt, you know, that is supposedly having this ultraviolet protection factor, and you use or wear another shirt, which is just like a regular shirt, only, you know, tightly knitted or that is not transparent, or, for example, it's denim or jeans in the fabric, right? And then you go in the water. They actually did this study. The protection, the difference of the two shirts protecting is basically minimal. So you please don't
are wasting money on these UV protected.
Well, I don't want to go as far as saying that they're wasting money, right? But I think the point I'm trying to make is that you don't need to spend a lot of money to to get protection from your clothing for as long as you're smart enough to pick the clothes, right? For example, we said with babies to pick lighter colors.
Yes.
For kids and adults, you want colors that are darker and brighter because those absorb the UV radiation better and doesn't get to your skin. So clothing is definitely something that we have to take into account to protect. Hat is very important. For us, the hat has to have at least 3 inches of a brim because then it protects your ears. This is a very common area for skin cancer. And you also need sunglasses.
Sunglasses.
We know that at least
With protection, right?
yes, ideally with the 100% UV protection for glasses, 9900. We know that at least 10% of skin cancers will happen around the eyelids.
Yeah.
Okay, so hat, clothing, sunglasses, and then we have sunscreen, right? When you talk about sunscreen, by the way, we don't use the word sunblock anymore. It's sunscreen, right? So
Because nothing actually blocks all the sun rays.
exactly.
Yeah.
And as I was saying with the sunglasses that we want UV protection of 99 to 100, that doesn't really apply with sunscreen. Although you see some sunscreens that say SPF 100, that's really not true. To give you an idea, a sunscreen that has an SPF of 15 is supposed to cover 93% or 93% of the UV radiation, right? Protect against it. That's 15. If you're using an SPF 30, it gives you a 97. And if you're using SPF 50, it just gives you a 98, so 1% difference.
Yeah.
And none of them will give you 100% protection.
Yeah.
So that's something that is very, very important for us to understand, and that's why the other layers of protection, like the
Are
clothing, hat, and the glasses, are important.
That'll build up your extra percentage. Let's go back to clothing for a second, because we saw the picture of the little girl in her swim shirt, and that's one of the things we know, especially with the children, and even for some of us adults, they'll be in the water most of the day. Is it recommended perhaps that you wear the swim tops?
That would
Especially
be,
as children?
yes, that would be ideal.
Yeah.
That would be ideal. Spandex, which is a common material for these types of clothing, it's perfect. It's very, very good.
Yeah.
So yes, that should
Because
be a
that
must.
cuts down the exposure.
Definitely. And then on the exposed areas, you want to use sunscreen.
Okay.
Sticking to children, the ingredients that we prefer for children or any person with sensitive skin would be any sunscreen that has zinc oxide or titanium dioxide,
Okay.
which are non-chemical sunscreens, as we call it, right?
Okay.
All right.
And
Let's go back to the sunscreen basics, because just putting it on is not enough. What are the rules for sunscreen?
okay, first of all, we know that 99% of us do not apply enough sunscreen and or do not reapply enough. So to have an idea, 1 ounce, which is the amount of sunscreen that would fit in a shot glass, that's the recommended amount for the areas that are exposed. So basically, it would be the face,
Here we go.
right? Neck, chest, and then the legs, no?
Yeah.
So that's the amount. But I don't think anyone really does that. And the other thing is that we do not reapply as often. If we're talking about a constant exposure, like being out in the sun, the beach, for example, in which, by the way, the reflection of the UV increases for up to 25%. Just because being near to sand and water,
Yes.
you'll be getting more radiation just because of that, right? So that's why the SPF tends to be at least 30 when you want to use it for the beach, no?
When do you put it on?
Okay, that's a very
And how often?
That's a very good question. It depends on the ingredients it has.
Oh.
If you're talking about the sunscreens that are the most common, that have the chemical sunscreen ingredients, you need to apply 15 to 30 minutes before you are exposed to the sunlight. Because the way these work is that you apply them and you have to give them that 30 minutes time for them to start working. And the way they work is when the sun or the UV radiation hits the skin, they absorb it and transform that into heat energy. And that is why also they are not the most effective, because at some point they will get saturated and then they stop working, right? So the chemical ones, the chemical ones, you need to apply 20 to 30 minutes before you're going to be exposed.
And then reapply after?
Every 2 hours.
Every 2 hours.
That's the ideal. Every 2 hours, and the last application should be around 4 o'clock. After that, the amount of UVB radiation, then it's minimal. Because remember, we're talking about two different types of UV radiation. UVA, which is there basically during the whole day. Even if it's cloudy, you get UVA. That doesn't change. What changes is the UVB. UVA goes through your windows, right, in the car or the house, but UVB gets to be blocked by the glass, right? But you still get UVA the whole day.
The whole day.
UVA is supposed to be responsible for skin aging and also skin cancer, no, as is UVB.
Going back to what you were saying, you were distinguishing between the chemical screens. What are the other types of screens?
Okay, the other ones are physical sunscreen or mineral sunscreens,
Okay.
and those are the ones I was telling you are the best for kids.
Okay.
Zinc oxide and titanium dioxide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the ones I recommend to my patients.
So are you saying that the kids' sunscreen may be better for us as adults as well?
Yes. If you have sensitive skin, that's the safest way to go.
Okay.
Right? But then it also depends. As a rule of thumb, the right sunscreen for you would be one that has an SPF of 30 that says broad spectrum protection, right? And one that does not burn or sting or cause any discomfort when you apply it.
Okay.
Because if it burns or stings when you apply it, as you're going to be reapplying it, that problem will probably get worse, and then you could get into a contact dermatitis.
Okay.
But you know,
So-
for a lot of families, they would say, you know what, it's best that we just avoid being out in the sun, because we don't know, we might get harmed by it, by the UVA, UVB.
Yeah.
When is the best time? If the kids want to go out, when is the best time to take them out?
That's an excellent question. No? There's a very simple way of knowing when you have to stay in. If you step out and your shade is shorter than you, go back inside. That, as simple as that. You know, it's
I like
very,
that,
even for kids,
Because that's the height
it's-
of the sun. Yeah.
right? So, but to put it in terms of the time, when you read books from the northern hemisphere, they say 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
But when you go outside here in Belize, you know, 7 o'clock, it already feels like. So that's why I rather like, you know, the shadow thing. No? Yeah.
And for children, when should they put on their sunblock and how often?
Okay. For everyone, it should be every 2 hours.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
Even if it says waterproof?
that's what I was wanting to mention. The waterproof should not appear anymore. It should say water resistant, and that comes with water resistant for 40 minutes or water resistant for 80 minutes.
Okay.
And what that means is that the sunscreen is supposed to give you at least 50% protection. 50% of the protection it should give you.
Yeah.
For that amount of time, be it 40 minutes or 80 minutes. So if you're going to be in the water and you're wearing or using a sunscreen that says water resistant 40 minutes, you definitely want to reapply after 40 minutes.
Wow.
Now, Doc, this is one of those issues that I think people listen to, but they kind of dismiss sometimes. Because we grow up in the tropics, and we go to the Keys, we go to the river, and we've been exposed to sun all our lives. How important is it that at some point in time we start to think about the exposure that we're getting from the sun? And how does it start to manifest that you know perhaps you've overdone it?
Okay. Well, the thing is that the skin, being the largest organ, is one of the most noble organs. It takes a lot of beating, and
Yes.
it stays noble, right? It doesn't really show much symptoms or anything. But when you have sun damage and you make that a routine, the first thing, especially my female patients, I think they tend to use more sunscreen when I say that at a given point, if you see 10 wrinkles on my face, 8 of them are due to sun damage, and only 2 are based on my chronological age. So aging, it's one of the manifestations of sun damage, right? So, and then obviously you have skin cancer, and that's the difficult part, because you would hear people say, I'm a fisherman, I've been out my whole life, and I don't have skin cancer, right? Because as most of the diseases, skin cancer is multifactorial, right? So you might have the genetics, but if you do not have the exposure, then more than likely you're not going to have it. But if you have the genetics and you do the exposure, then my friend, definitely you will have it, right?
And for let's talk about the being exposed to sunlight and seawater, being exposed to sunlight and river or fresh water, and your sunscreen. Now, what would be the best place for people to be at, especially in the height of heat, which is Easter, preferably by the seaside or by a riverside or by a poolside?
Okay, in terms of that, it doesn't really matter, because like I told you, once you're close to the water, reflection increases, no? So it doesn't make a difference. What the difference might lie in what to do after you come out. For some people, salt water would be irritating. For some other people, the chlorine in the pool might be irritating. So the best thing is just to rinse off and then slather with moisturizer and then sunscreen. That would be the ideal.
Dr. Lopez, we know that in Belize people have many different complexions, and obviously I think one of the misconceptions I hear very often is that people who are darker in skin don't have to worry about sunscreen. How much truth is there in the statement?
Okay, that's a very good question. Let me just say that we all come with an SPF, right? So pale white skin, it's said to have an SPF of 3. Darker skin, like black skin, it's supposed to have a 13.4 SPF. So we do come with some type of protection, right? But none of us, no matter how dark our skin, is immune to sun damage, because ultimately what happens is UV radiation from the sun will damage the DNA of the skin cells. And when that damage is big enough, important enough, then mutations will happen, and that is skin cancer.
Wow.
So it doesn't matter how dark the skin. And actually what we have seen is that people with darker skin and skin cancer tend to have more complications, more morbidity, and sometimes more mortality because of that idea. If I have a new lump on me and I have dark skin, I am less likely to think that is skin cancer as opposed to a person with fair skin. So I, with darker skin, will wait longer before I go to the doctor. So that means that I could have more complications because the diagnosis was not made as early.
And no matter what color what complexion you have,
it doesn't matter.
You will get sunburn. It just shows differently.
Yes. Well, the concept of sunburn is basically the redness, no? So dark skin rarely gets to that point, but it could happen.
But it will still hurt.
But the damage will happen.
And I was getting to that because there's also data that proves that when you get terrible sunburn, every time you get a terrible sunburn, it increases your chances of skin cancer?
It doubles it.
Yeah.
It doubles it.
We
And
have-
what kind of sunburn are we talking about? Like a light tan or like blistering sunburn?
No, sunburn is whenever your skin gets red. No, it could be grade 1, it could be grade 2. The grade 2 would be the blisters.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so that's when it happens.
Yeah.
At this point,
And
you
every
must-
time, as in it happens this Easter, next Easter, you double your
the
chances
chances
Yes.
of getting skin cancer.
Yes.
of receiving.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So we're trying to give everybody the advice early. We're trying to tell them to get that sunscreen, SPF 30 minimum, apply before you go in the sun every 2 hours, stay out of the hottest time out of the sun on the hottest time of the day if you can, wear protective clothing, still have protective barriers.
Yeah.
Use a shadow.
The shadow rule. And all of that into consideration, you will have some patients who come to you and say, Doc, I got too burned.
Oh yeah.
And some of us at home will be trying to come up with our own remedies as well. What's the best thing to do for after sun care?
Okay.
We are going to pay attention. We're going to try our best, but it may still happen, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you want to do after or immediately after you notice you got sunburn, you want to again moisturize. A tip I give my patients is have your moisturizer in the fridge, so whenever you're going to use it is cold, and then apply it it's much more soothing. And then if it's really red, you might want to use a cortisone cream, which is an anti-inflammatory, at least for a couple of days, no? And that should greatly soothe it. If you, on the other hand, got a sunburn as bad as getting blisters, please do not deroof the blisters. Leave them there, because that's actually a protection or a protection mechanism of your skin, and that blister will come off whenever the skin is ready. Now, sometimes they're tight and that hurts. So what you could do is with a needle, you just pierce it and let some of the
Liquid.
liquid come out,
Comes out.
and then the pain
Yeah.
lessens.
But don't peel it.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Definitely not.
I could feel it.
Anything else you'd want to tell us about why or how we should protect our
Do's
skin?
and don'ts. Yes.
A common question I get also is, how long is a sunscreen good for? Like, you know, I have this sunscreen for a year. Does it still work? It's really hard to say, but what we know is that according to the regulations that manufacturers have to comply with, a sunscreen is supposed to work for up to 3 years after manufacturing. No?
Okay.
But that being said, if you have the sunscreen that you used last summer, then you're doing something wrong. Right? So you have to use that sunscreen. So you have a leftover of this Easter next year.
Next year. Ooh, lot. I'm sure a lot of shelves have that right now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything about that, but yeah. All right. But of course, you know, Dr. Lopez, you see patients all the time. You see people with different cancer. So we know it is an issue.
Yeah.
And people are facing these issues when they go to the doctor. So the best thing to do is to prevent having
Definitely.
any further complications.
Definitely, yes.
All right.
Thank you for being
Thank you.
here.
Thank you very much.
We're going to go ahead and take our final break. And when we come back, we'll have our wrap up. So stay tuned.